Very quickly, let's do a quick learning check on the of the key definitions and concepts of the patterns of inheritance. So let's try matching the definitions on the left to the terminologies that I told you about in the last video. A genotype made up of the same alleles would be homozygous. Different forms of genes for a single trait is alleles. A gene that is always expressed is dominant, and gene that is expressed only in the homozygous state is recessive. Genotypes made up of two different alleles are heterozygous. One thing I forgot to tell you is that alleles are represented using the same letter. The dominant allele is always represented in uppercase letters, and the recessive is expressed in lowercase letters. With that in mind, let's try number 6. Number 6, the dominant alleles in this case would be D, L, M, N, and R, as well as S. The recessive allele, on the other hand, would be any letter in lowercase, represented in lowercase font, which would be N, D, R, and K. Homozygous dominant would mean that a person has the same genes. Homo means same, and you have the same genes, and they're both dominant. So in this case, the homozygous dominant is right over here, and KK, as well as T and T. The homozygous recessive would mean you have the same genes, but they're both recessive. In this case, it would be EE, QQ, as well as WW. The genotype in which the dominant gene must show, a dominant gene would show by default if it is homozygous. It will show here. It will show here. It would also show here. They're all homozygous dominant, but they would also show in heterozygous situations, for example, over here, because what you have over here is dominant allele and is recessive. Because the dominant gets expressed, the dominant gene would show in this case. It will also show in the case of JJ and SS. The genotype in which the recessive genes must show can only be possible if you have a homozygous recessive situation. For example, AA. Because the only possibility, sorry, not the only possibility, but because they're homozygous recessive, meaning they only have one version of the gene, and that is the one version that will show. So homozygous recessive would express the recessive gene. A heterozygous case, in a heterozygous case, the recessive gene would not be manifested. Hopefully that helps, and next time we're going to be looking at Punnett squares, and Punnett squares are basically, let me just give you a quick intro. So when we do Punnett square problems, we are able to kind of pick up from here. So Punnett square is basically a grid in which you kind of look at the combinations and frequencies of different genotypes and phenotypes. For example, if you look at this one, you're looking at the parental gametes. that you deduct from a problem given to you or the information given to you, and then you take so usually you would put the maternal gametes over on this side, and you would put the the paternal gametes on the vertical side of the grid, and you would then see what kind of possibilities are likely. So in this case, whatever D represents, for example, let's say that D represents dark eyes and is dominant to light eyes, represented with the lowercase d. Now, if the mother is dark-eyed dominant, heterozygous dominant, and the father is light-eyed recessive, but homozygous recessive, the offsprings would show these frequencies and these genotypes and phenotypes. For example, dark eye would show in 1 and 2 of their 4 kids, meaning 50% every time they have a child, they would have a 50% chance of being dark-eyed. And light eyes would show in 2 out of 4 cases as well. So the chances of these two individuals of having a light-eyed child would be also 2 over 4, which is also 50%. But sorry, going back to the question was examine the following: Punnett squares and circle, those are correct. Let's see, so this possibility seems correct, this possibility seems correct, because you have a small d and a small d. Small d, an uppercase d, small d, that looks correct, and this also looks correct. Let's examine this one. This possibility seems correct. This possibility, however, is wrong. If you look over here, this is a dominant allele, and over here you have a recessive gene. So you can't get a homozygous dominant when you cross a dominant and a recessive. This is wrong. I'm not going to go over the rest, but you get the idea. Hopefully this helps. Thanks.